Hollywood is known for being Hollyweird. But what about the movie magic turned real-life nightmare? Popular movies that were not just merely imitating the realm of magic, but truly manifested it into the lives around them. Just like anything used improperly, it had deadly and disturbing consequences. This is GASP, Rituals in Reality. Good dawn or good dusk to you spookies. My name is Sooky Sookson, and I will be your ghostess. You are listening to GASP Podcast, Ghost Adventures. Tonight we are casting a circle and calling the corners, but unlike Big Hollywood, we will do so with intention and respect to the craft. And I don't mean just filmmaking. I'm talking witchcraft. This evening, we are spilling the tea on the big Hollywood films that not only made movies about magic and witchcraft, but actually used real-life spells, rituals, sigils, totems, and ceremonies in the movies. And because of which, spooky paranormal things began to arise, as well as the chilling consequences and strange events that occurred during and afterwards. So, spill for a real spell and let us slip into something spooky, shall we? Hi, spookies. Welcome back. For today's episode, I wanted to cover witch movies. Witch movies? Witchy movies. Because I am a witch and I grew up as a little baby witch. And I remember just these movies were my escape, my healing, my therapy, my best friend, my education, my catalyst to creativity, everything, all of it. I love movies about witchcraft, especially when they're done right. And you're probably wondering, what do I mean done right? I mean, they pulled on a consultant, they did their research, they cracked open a damn book, They made it authentic, genuine witchcraft, not just, spooky lady with an ugly face, warts on her face, pointed hat and broomstick. No. Herbs, candles, anointing things, carving things, ritual daggers, athames, chalices, representing all the elements, calling the corners, calling the elements, casting a circle, and spelling as spell work should be. And that's what made these movies so good. So tonight we're going to talk about The Craft, Hereditary, and The Skeleton Key. These are all movies that I loved to watch growing up, or when, Hereditary came out kind of recently. These are all movies that I thought did a really good job at displaying real life witchcraft and how beautiful the craft can be and how spooky also. Not only are these movies that I absolutely adore and feel like are really hit the nail on the head, but they're movies that, first of all, had consultants, did research, and used real life spells, real life rituals, from pagan witchcraft to Wicca to Santa Muerta to voodoo to hoodoo, conglomerating it, blending them, and unknowingly casting real spells that would have dire consequences and strange spooky phenomenon happening around the cast, the crew, and even their families. But up first, we're going to talk about the craft. Read a lot of witchcraft books and I watched a lot of movies. This is one of the movies that really ingrained in me how I could make witchcraft my own, how I could bring my own style to it, my own flavor. Other books that I had read actually taught me first about calling corners, element work, candle magic, casting a circle, but it was the craft that really painted the picture for me. Showed me, yeah, but don't just do it. Go out in the woods and do it. Find a little fairy circle and do it. Incorporate your everyday items into your spells. You'll see what I mean. If you have not watched the movie, I'm going to give you a short little plot summary. So The Craft, 1996, revolves around main character Sarah Bailey, a troubled teenager with unusual abilities. Moves from San Francisco to Los Angeles with her father and stepmother. There's a lot of mystery around her birth mother. At her new school, she befriends a trio of outcast girls rumored to be witches. Bonnie Harper bears burn scars. Nancy Downs lives in a trailer with her mother and abusive stepfather. And Rochelle Zimmerman, a black student, endures racist bullying from a group of white girls. The girls worship a powerful earth deity they call Manon. Popular jock Chris Hooker shows interest in Sarah, which she reciprocates. But when Bonnie sees Sarah levitating a pencil in class, the outcasts become convinced that she is the fourth they need to complete their coven, the fourth corner, the fourth element, thus making them a full completed coven, a full season cycle, and all the more powerful. While walking home from school, the girls are approached by a vagrant who had earlier frightened Sarah with a snake when she moved in. By the incident with home invasion, and her father defended her with like a fire iron. He was like in their moving truck or something. As he chases her down the street, the girls are watching and they're scared for her and they're kind of like focusing their energy in on him. And he actually is struck and killed by a car while trying to chase her down the streets of LA. The girls believe their combined will actually caused this accident, and this trauma strengthens their bond. Through this bonding trauma dump, it's also revealed that Sarah once attempted suicide because she believes that she killed her mother because her mother died during childbirth. So it's like this great shame that Sarah has that she shares with her new best friends, quotation mark. Now, after a date with Chris, Sarah is devastated when he spreads a false rumor that they had sex. Seeking revenge or change, each girl decides to cast a spell now that they are completed and powerful. Sarah places a love spell on Chris. Rochelle curses her bully Laura Lizzie, making her hair fall out. Bonnie wishes for beauty, and Nancy asks for power. The spell succeeds. Chris becomes obsessed with Sarah. Bonnie's scars miraculously heal. Laura's hair begins to fall out, and Nancy's stepfather dies of a heart attack, which allows her and her mother to collect his life insurance, move into this like dank ass luxury high-rise apartment. Her mom's got like a fucking jukebox filled with only Connie Francis. It's very iconic. Now, drunk on power, Nancy urges the others to join her in a ritual called the Invocation of the Spirit. Despite warnings from Lario, who is this beautiful witchy woman who's actually the owner of the local occult shop and practicing witch, she basically is the one that tells them, hey, don't steal from my store, careful who you hex, because witchcraft, whatever you send out, comes back to you threefold. They ignore her warnings and they go ahead and they steal this book that lets them invoke the spirit, Manon. And they go out to this like beautiful beach cove area. I think it was actually in Santa Monica. And they do this ritual. They each come with like an animal for sacrifice, like a bird, a butterfly, a snake, a rabbit. And then they do this calling the horners, casting a circle ritual. They call the spirit, they invoke Manon, and during this, Nancy is struck by lightning. All the girls, we assume, get like knocked out and fall asleep. The next morning, Nancy is seen walking on water, not just water, on the goddamn ocean. Like she's coming from the horizon towards the beach. The girls start to stir and wake up, witnessing this Jesus-like moment. And then they realize they are surrounded by beached sharks and other dead sea creatures. It's this very intense, somber moment. Nancy is overjoyed, almost like manic energy, screaming and crying that all of the beached whales and sharks are a gift to her from Manon. In the days that follow, Nancy becomes increasingly unstable, reckless, endangering herself and others. The spell soon brings unintended consequences. Bonnie grows vain and cruel. Rochelle is disturbed to find Laura traumatized by her baldness. And Chris's obsession turns violent. When Sarah rejects his advances as he's becoming not himself anymore and almost like a shell of a person, just obsessed with being with her, Chris attempts to rape her. When Sarah escapes from this and finds the girls, they're absolutely enraged by this, especially Nancy. And to punish Chris, Nancy uses a glamour spell to impersonate Sarah and tries to seduce him at a party. The real Sarah intervenes, but when Chris realizes Nancy's deception, he accuses her of jealousy and of being a witch. Furious, Nancy kills him by throwing him out a window, and her iconic line, "Jealous? You don't even exist to me." Sarah attempts a binding spell to stop Nancy from causing more harm to others and herself, but it fails, and the coven turns against her. They invade her dreams, conjure a swarm of insects, and make her believe her family has died in a plane crash, driving her toward suicide. Overcoming her fear and having a momentary like coming to light, coming to love, her mom like reaches out to her, gives her strength, and Sarah successfully invokes the spirit of Manon into herself, healing and empowering her instead of corrupting and deranging her. Once she's fully invoked the spirit, she uses the magic to terrify Bonnie and Rochelle with mirrors of illusions. Bonnie's face is rescarred and Rochelle's own hair is falling out before defeating and binding Nancy, rendering her not only harmless, but clinically insane. Later, Bonnie and Rochelle visit Sarah, hoping to reconcile, but she rejects them, telling them that Manon stripped their powers because they abused them, not because of her. Scoffing, they claim Sarah must have also lost hers too. That is, until she conjures a random lightning storm with a near tornado, nearly crushing them with a falling tree branch. Until it suddenly clears up just like that. She warns them not to end up like Nancy, who has now been committed to a psychiatric hospital, delusional, restrained, and insisting she can fly. She can fly. She can fly. All right, now to the rituals. Now, the movie The Craft, they actually brought on a real-life witch consultant on everything. I mean, we're talking she made the potions, anointed the candles. She wrote or rewrote every single spell and ritual used in the film. Now, writing and rewriting, you're probably wondering, what do we mean by this? Some of the spells were taken from actual real spell books or, kind of texts. And what she did, Pat Devon, the consultant and Wicca practitioner, she rewrote some of the spells so that they weren't so authentic, or would write them so they were more authentic. There was like a blending and a balance of wanting everything in the movie to feel like real Los Angeles witchcraft of the 90s, while also making tweaks to it so that they were not actually invoking dark spirits or performing real hexes over and over and over, take after take after take. So she wanted it to feel real enough, but not do actual damage to anybody. And that just goes to show how much of a real life witch this bitch is. She took it seriously. And thank God, because spooky stuff still happened. So I can't even imagine what would have happened if everything was as real as she could get it. Fairuza Balka was a practicing witch also, which brought a sick authenticity to her character. She truly practiced witchcraft before the movie, during the movie, and long after. And I think when you watch Nancy, it's very believable she's a witch. Not only a witch, but the leader of the coven. Everything she's doing, even casting the spells, I mean, you feel it. You really feel it. Now, the director, Fleming, he didn't want hippie chicks, goth chicks, and witch hats. No. He wanted a cool group of girls who were outcasts of themselves. He thought all of them should look like they belong in The Cure, which is very much fitting with his own interpretation of the quote-unquote other side of LA. Where one side was Hollywood, rodeo, glitz, and glam, he very much saw and felt the other side of LA that was mystical, mysterious, eerie, and straight up gothic and witchy. That was the vibe he wanted for the movie. He was exploring that side of town, if you will. Now, something to note that I love is that Manon, the god, is actually a fake god created for the film. They are an all-powerful deity, a sun god, main god energy, while remaining entirely fictional. And this was to be respectful with real-life religions and spiritual practices, wanting to be respectful to real-life deities that people worship or practice too, and for safety purposes. Again, we didn't want to call up, Beelzebub. Now, the beach scene, where they all cast a circle, call the corners, sacrifice their respective elemental animals, and invoke Manon. They had timed out the ocean tides with the time of the night for the scenes. They wanted it to be coming and crashing, and they wanted to have this beach energy and this wild storm, water and earth, sky kind of conglomerating moment. But they didn't want their set to be washed off. So they were very tedious and scientific with what time the tides were coming in, at what point, at what level, marking everything out so that they were coming up and you could see them in the shot, but they were never getting close enough to actually take out the fire or drown the butterfly in its cage. They had it figured out, right? This is movies. This is Hollywood. They've been doing this for decades. They got it figured out. Yet, in the middle of the scene, somehow, randomly, the ocean had been coming up to, like, let's say, point C, if it's A, B, C, like layers on the beach. Let's say it was coming up to point C. Randomly, in the middle of the scene, the ocean surged up and went past point A, washing out their entire set, the entire circle, into the ocean, which then left cast and crew running into the ocean, chasing after the animals, the items, everything, trying to get it all back onto the beach and dried off so that they could set up and shoot again. You know, I guess they weren't going to lose their light because this was at nighttime, but there was a moment where the crew didn't know if there was like a random hurricane that was about to come in. So they were trying to like walkie in and radio into people and check with that. No, for no reason did that ocean surge, but it did. Another very peculiar thing about this set was that Robin Turney, who played Sarah, she thought she would have to deal with the fake and was rudely surprised when she had real life rats, snakes, and spiders constantly dumped on her head, body, or shoved in her face during those traumatizing Coven after the Sarah scenes, which is basically the whole last chunk of the movie. Robin said, "It was exhausting. A lot of location work, a lot of nights. One time we started to film outside because the forecast was good, only to be caught in a massive deluge, which is like a heavy rainfall. And once a flock of crows just flew into the scene, disrupting and terrorizing everyone completely out of nowhere." It was very much giving that there's some kind of spirits or powers that be that did not want these scenes to be. Turney said, "It wasn't all bad though. One day, Pat Devon came up to me and said she'd written a spell to make us #1 at the box office. It worked. Not too spooky, but that's just #1 on our list." Coming up next, we're going to cover one of my favorite horror movies. I think a beautiful adaptation or Hollywood adaptation of voodoo. Coming up next is The Skeleton Key. The Skeleton Key. Filmed in 2005, starring Kate Hudson. God, sorry, I can't remember anybody else. But it's very good. Here's a little plot summary. So Caroline Ellis, hospice nurse, quits her position at a nursing home and is hired as the caretaker of an isolated plantation house in Terrebonne Parish, Louisiana. The aging matron of the house, Violet Devereaux, needs help looking after her husband, Benjamin, who was mostly paralyzed by an apparent stroke. At the insistence of the family's estate lawyer, Luke Marshall, Caroline accepts the position. After Ben's attempt to escape his room during a storm, Caroline investigates the house's attic where Violet said Ben suffered his stroke. She uses a skeleton key, which Violet gave her, to enter the attic and scope it out. It's there she discovers a secret room filled with ritual paraphernalia. Caroline confronts Violet, who reveals that the room used to belong to 2 African-American servants who were forced to service at the house by the Thorpe family 90 years prior. They say servants, but they were enslaved human beings. The enslaved servants were named Mama Cecile and Papa Justify. They were known as During this time of their life, they were known as renowned hoodoo practitioners who were lynched after conducting a voodoo ritual rite with the Thorpes' 2 young children, from who Violet and Ben later bought the house. Violet tells Caroline that they keep no mirrors in the house because they see reflections of Cecil and Justify in them, as their spirits allegedly haunt the house. Caroline later discovers a phonograph record from the attic, Conjure of Sacrifice, a recording of Papa Justify reciting a hoodoo rite. Caroline surmises that Ben's stroke was caused by hoodoo, but believes that his paralytic state is a nocebo effect induced by his own belief rather than something actually supernatural. So, like a placebo effect, but based on beliefs and your activities, I guess. So instead of taking a pill and it be a placebo, by witnessing this like voodoo ritual, Caroline believes that Ben convinced himself that he's cursed. So, after taking advice from her friend Jill, Caroline visits a hidden hoodoo shop in a nearby laundromat, where a hoodoo woman gives her tools and instructions to cure Ben. After she conducts the rite, Ben regains some of his ability to move and speak, and he begs Caroline to get him away from Violet. Caroline tells Luke she is suspicious of Violet, but he remains skeptical. Luke is like this cute guy who she meets when she first moves in, and there's a little sexual romantic tension there, and she's kind of telling him all these weird things going on, and he's consistently trying to be the voice of reason and devil's advocate. However, she convinces him to travel with her to a gas station that Caroline previously noted was lined with brick dust, like a salt circle, but brick dust, which she was told by the hoodoo woman is a hoodoo defense. Supposedly, no one who means someone harm can pass a line of brick dust. She asks one of the proprietors, a blind woman, about the Conjure of Sacrifice, which she learns is a spell wherein the caster steals the remaining years of life from the victim. Increasingly convinced of Hoodoo's authenticity, Caroline fears that Violet will soon cast the spell on Ben. Caroline discovers that Violet is unable to pass a line of brick dust laid across one of the house's doorways that Caroline lines. This only confirms her suspicions that Violet means Caroline harm. She knocks out Violet and attempts to escape the house with Ben, but the front gate is chained shut. Caroline hides Ben on the property and travels to Luke's office for help. Luke reveals to be Violet's accomplice and brings Caroline back to the house. Caroline escapes, gets into a fight with Violet, and violently pushes her down the stairs, breaking her legs. Remember that for later. With strategic use of brick dust, Caroline flees to the attic and calls 911 and her friend Jill for help. She casts what she believes is a protective spell. Violet, having caught up with her, reveals to Caroline that she doesn't know what she's doing and has accidentally, inadvertently spelled herself into a trap using a reverse protective circle. Luke plays the Conjure of Sacrifice as Violet pushes a full-length mirror at Caroline, which reflects the original owner's daughter, then Violet, and lastly, Mama Cecile. When the mirror collides with Caroline, her soul switches bodies with Violet's. Violet revealed to be, in fact, Mama Cecile, who had been occupying Violet's body through the conjure, wakes up in Caroline's body and force feeds Caroline, now in Violet's body, a potion that induces a stroke-like paralytic state, like Ben's. Luke, who is actually Papa Justify, who had possessed Luke after living as Ben, like Cecile did with Violet, he arrives upstairs revealing that Mama Cecile and Papa Justify have been conducting the Conjure of Sacrifice on new people since their supposed deaths. They had in fact swapped bodies with the two Thorpe children just before the lynching. Because hoodoo is only effective on those who believe in it, Cecile and Justify had to wait for Caroline to come to believe through her own investigation of hoodoo. They merely planted just the right amount of seeds for her to come to this conclusion herself. Emergency services arrive the next morning and take Caroline and Luke away, trapped in their paralyzed, dying bodies. When Jill arrives, quote-unquote Luke, which is really Papa Justify, tells her that the Devereaux left their estate to Caroline, ensuring that Cecile and Justify will continue to occupy the house. But now they have their sights set on Jill because Mama Cecile, she prefers to be in a beautiful black woman's body, not some white lady. And so the horror persists. Yeah, no happy endings here, but real horror fans, we love a good not happy ending. But let's talk about these real life rituals. The real life ritual that was used in The Skeleton Key was casually practiced take after take after take in the film and were entirely authentic hoodoo protection spells, actual mirror magic, and real-life possession rites. The mirror magic in hoodoo is a form of conjure used to reflect energy, protect against harm, or manipulate circumstances by using mirrors to return energy to a sender, aka a return to sender spell. It also acts as a bridge between the physical and the spiritual worlds, frequently used to trap, expose, or confuse enemies while offering personal protection. Now, common mirror magic techniques used in hoodoo. There's mirror boxes, reversal spells, placing a target's name, photo, or personal item, tag lock, inside a box lined with mirrors to reflect, amplify, or restrict their actions. There's protection and negativity repel. A common method that involves placing a mirror facing outward inside a bowl of black salt to repel negativity. The return to sender, directing curses or ill will back to the perpetrator by reflecting their energy back on them, which in a way they use this to kind of do the possession rite. Then there's binding, using mirrors to trap an enemy or prevent them from causing further harm. There's scrying, using a reflective surface to see into the spirit world or divine future events. And then there's aesthetic elements, incorporating materials like polished silver, tinfoil, or mirror shards, often from a broken mirror, to enhance the reflective magical intent. Commonly used to stop gossip or harmful behavior, this practice also allows practitioners to utilize the mirror to magnify their own work or turn a foe's malicious intent against them. Now, when it comes to the possession rites, enslaved African Americans performed the counterclockwise circle dance until someone was pulled into the center of the ring by the sacred spiritual realm. The center of the ring shout is where the ancestors and the Holy Spirit reside at the center. So it's a very, very powerful ceremony. We see a little bit of this in the beginning of the movie. And then the ring shout, a sacred dance in hoodoo and black churches, results in spirit possession. The ring shout is a counterclockwise circle dance with singing and clapping that results in possession by the Holy Spirit. So more of like in Christian churches. It is believed when people become possessed by the Holy Spirit, their hearts become filled with the Holy Ghost, which purifies their heart and soul from evil and replaces it with joy. The ring shout in hoodoo was influenced by the Congo cosmogram, a sacred symbol of the Bantu Congo people in Central Africa. It symbolizes the cyclical nature of life of birth, life, death, and rebirth, aka reincarnation of the soul. The Congo cosmogram also symbolizes the rising and setting of the sun rising in the east and setting in the west, that is counterclockwise, which is why ring shouters dance in a circle counterclockwise to invoke this spirit. They are the sun moving the energy of the earth, bridging the earthly realm to the spirit. Now, in the movie, actress Gina Rowlands actually slipped and fell during a nighttime raining chase scene. The scene where Violet and Caroline are fighting and Violet falls down the stairs and breaks her leg. Well, in trying to shoot that whole fight scene, Violet, actually slipped and fell and literally broke her hand for real. This caused production to pause for 5 weeks, which meant cast and crew were not being paid or working during this time. Very stressful, very not good. Another bad omen of the movie was that after filming wrapped up, the plantation where the film was set and filmed was actually destroyed during Hurricane Katrina, just 1 week after filming had officially wrapped. The Skeleton Key is based on old movies, one called The Uninvited, filmed in 1944, and The Innocents from 1961. The Innocents would later be adapted into the Netflix show The Haunting of Bly Manor, and The Uninvited, which is about a brother and sister buying an old abandoned mansion from a commander, his great niece being obsessed with the house because her mother allegedly died there, surrounded in great mystery. Turns out her real mother was a Spanish gypsy that her father had an affair with, who had frequented on the property. His wife found out and tried to steal and kill the baby, but before doing so, she was pushed and fell off a cliff near the house by the gypsy. The gypsy and the wife died. The gypsy was haunting this manor, and they thought was the malicious spirit, when in truth she was trying to protect the niece and the couple, the brother and sister, from the wife's spirit who was trying to inflict harm on them. This basically like the brother and sister inheriting a mansion that has like weird, spooky, haunted history is kind of where inspiration to the Skeleton Key kind of came from. Like the idea that Violet and Ben are sorry, I didn't mention this before. So Papa Justify and Mama Cecile, when they were enslaved servants working in the house, the two young Thorpe children, they successfully possessed them. That brother and sister, those children, are Violet and Ben Devereaux, who then go on to possess Caroline and Luke, right? So that kind of brother-sister weirdness gets transferred over. Also, in The Innocents, a governess moves into the old mansion to take care of a little boy and girl who are quite peculiar. She soon fears the home is haunted by many dark spirits and that the children are being possessed by them to do their bidding. This turns into Bly Manor. Sorry if that was a spoiler. Children possessed by spirits so they can live again. Also, the lady kind of coming into work and being isolated and consumed in this haunted. That very much bleeds into what would be the Skeleton Key. Producers of this film consulted with an authentic voodoo priest and a voodoo priestess, both. All about the authentic hoodoo rituals, voodoo as a religion, and the male and female hierarchy and respective roles that showed up in the religion and the spiritual practice. So they really wanted it to feel very authentic, very real, especially having this kind of like matron and patron energy of voodoo and hoodoo. They also took care to shoot in authentic Louisiana locations because they wanted it to have that real Creole voodoo atmosphere. The set is located on the actual Felicity Plantation on the Mississippi River in St. James Parish, Louisiana. And so also it being a real plantation that had real enslaved Americans working, living, and dying, being tortured, traumatized. So the set itself must have been very haunted and just dripping in dread. Terribly spooky. Hereditary. Filmed in 2018, Hereditary is an American supernatural psychological horror film written and directed by Ari Aster. Starring Toni Collette, Alex Wolff, Millie Shapiro, Ann Dowd, and Gabrielle Byrne, the film follows Annie Graham, a grieving miniature artist who uncovers disturbing secrets about her recently deceased mother. She, along with her husband Steve and their children, Peter and Charlie, are subsequently tormented by sinister occurrences. Astor conceived it as primarily a family drama consisting of two distinct halves, just like a coin. Principal photography commenced in Salt Lake City in February 2017, with most of the indoor scenes shot on custom-built sets on a soundstage to give the film a dollhouse aesthetic. Now, a little summary for you guys. I'll try and make this quick. So, miniature artist Annie Graham lives in northern Utah with her psychiatrist's husband Steve and their 16-year-old son Peter and 13-year-old daughter Charlie. The family attends the funeral of Annie's secretive mother Ellen, at which Annie is surprised at the number of mourners in attendance. She goes to a bereavement support group where she reveals that she and her mother had a fraught relationship, that is, until her daughter Charlie was born. Whereupon Ellen suddenly became a significant figure in raising her and supporting the family, but solely Charlie. Meanwhile, Steve receives a phone call telling him that unknown perpetrators have desecrated Ellen's gravesite. This he keeps from Annie and hopes to not upset her. Peter is invited to a party, and Annie insists that Charlie accompany him. Left unattended by Peter, Charlie eats a piece of cake containing walnuts, which triggers her severe nut allergy, sending her into anaphylactic shock. As Peter drives Charlie to the hospital, she leans her head out the window, gasping for air. Peter swerves out of the road to avoid hitting a dead deer that's lying in the middle, causing Charlie to be decapitated by a telephone pole. In shock, Peter drives home and leaves Charlie's headless body in the back seat of Annie's car, which Annie discovers to her horror the following morning. Following Charlie's funeral, Peter becomes reclusive and racked with guilt. Annie becomes bitter and resentful towards Peter, and Steve tries to mediate peace between them. Annie is befriended by a support group member named Joan, who suggests she perform a seance to communicate with Charlie's ghost, claiming this will bring closure. Later that night, Annie convinces Peter and Steve to witness the seance. Objects begin to move, and Peter is terrified when Annie speaks in Charlie's voice. Terrified, calling out for help. That is until Steve throws ice water on her, erupting her from the trance. As supernatural forces begin to haunt Peter, Annie suspects Charlie's spirit has become vengeful and demonic. She sees threatening images manifest in Charlie's sketchbook, which she throws into the fireplace. Her clothes go up in flame which she throws into the fireplace. This suddenly triggers her own clothes to go up in flame at the exact same time as the book. But stop burning once she removes the book from the fire. Annie goes through Ellen's belongings and finds a photo album showing Ellen as, quote, Queen Lee, the leader of a coven, and Joan as one of her acolytes. Another book she finds describes the demon king Paimon, who wishes to inhabit a male host. The book goes on to read that the summoners of Paimon will receive wealth and rewards once he receives his male host. In the attic, Annie finds Ellen's rotting, headless corpse and occultist runes drawn in her blood all over the attic. While Peter is outside his school, Joan appears across the street and attempts to expel his spirit from his body for Paimon. In class, Peter is taken over by an unseen force and slams his head against his desk, breaking his own nose. Annie informs Steve of her ties to Charlie's sketchbook and begs him to burn it, unable to bring herself to take her own life. When he refuses, believing Annie has gone absolutely insane, she snatches the book from him and flings it into the fire, only for Steve to burst into flames instead. Annie watches in horror, but her expression grows blank as she is suddenly taken over by the same force that has possessed Peter earlier. As naked coven members gather both inside and around the house, Peter wakes after dark and finds his father's charred corpse, then quickly notices one of the coven's members in a nearby doorway. A possessed Annie then chases him through the house. He attempts to hide in the attic. Annie follows him and beheads herself with a length of piano wire. Horrified, Peter jumps out of the window and falls seemingly to his death. A glowing orb enters his body and revives him. Now displaying Charlie's mannerisms, he follows Annie's floating corpse into Charlie's treehouse, where Joan and the other coven members, as well as the headless corpse of Annie and Ellen, are now worshipping a mannequin with Charlie's crowned, severed head placed on top. Joan removes the crown and places it on Peter's head, addressing him as Charlie. She then proclaims that Charlie is Paimon, the coven having connected his female body and given him his preferred male host at last. The coven hails Peter as King Paimon, and he silently observes. And that's how the movie ends. If you're confused, don't you worry. We're going to go over some creepy context clues. Symbols, sigils, everywhere. Paimon's symbol, which is painted in blood on the wall of Graham's attic and also adorns the white gown that Grandma Lee's headless corpse is wearing, actually makes several cameo appearances throughout the film. The first of which is at Lee's funeral. Annie can be seen wearing the symbol as a necklace, a little golden chain, no doubt gifted to her by her mother when they weren't estranged. Her mother is also seen wearing the same necklace during her open casket funeral, while she still has her head, of course. In Joan's apartment, Annie's new friend from the grief group and seance. When Annie goes there and Joan's not home, we actually get to see a peekaboo inside, which reveals 2 more Paimon symbols along with elements set up for a ritual. Then, when Annie is going through her mother's old boxes of stuff, she comes across the book with the same symbol. Unbeknownst to her, she is holding a Paimon grimoire. And on to the decapitation, thank you very much. If you thought Charlie's death was an accident, baby, you'd be wrong. While driving to the party, Astor stops the camera on the light post that will decapitate her later. Scratched into the wood of that light post is Paimon's symbol, confirming that the cult used their magic to orchestrate Charlie's death, down to the very last peanut. That's not all. She also comes across a book with no labels, but when opened, she and the viewers at home get a whole glimpse into the demon Paimon and his summoning rituals, as well as his own backstory. At first, we just see an image of Paimon, but this is immensely telling right from the get-go. Now, the real-life rituals used in the film. The demon king Paimon actually originates from numerous grimoires, including the Lesser Key of Solomon, Pseudo-Daemonia Daemonum, Dictionnaire Infernal, Livre des Esprits Liber Officiorum Spiritum, and the Book of Abramelin. According to the Lesser Key of Solomon, Paimon is a king of hell who commands 200 legions of spirits or angels. Paimon is obedient to Lucifer and manifests with a crown on his head, heralded by a host of spirits like men with trumpets and well-sounding cymbals, and all other sorts of musical instruments. The film began shooting in Utah, February 2017. The exteriors of the Graham family house and the tree house were shot in Summit County, and the cemetery scene was filmed at Larkin Sunset Gardens in Sandy. The school scenes were shot at West High School and Utah State Fair Park, but all other interiors, including both versions of the treehouse, were built from scratch on a soundstage, again to give it that isolated, uncanny valley syndrome dollhouse effect. Since each room was built on a stage, walls could be removed to shoot scenes at a much greater distance than a practical location would allow, creating the dollhouse aesthetic of the film. Astor later recalled during a Reddit AMA, Alex Wolff told me not to say the name of William Shakespeare's Scottish play out loud during filming. because of some of the superstitions theater because of some superstitious theater legend. I smugly announced the name, and then one of our lights burst during shooting of the following scene, which if you've ever had a stage light burst, I mean, if you've ever had a regular light bulb pop and explode and burst, it's fucking scary. And that's like the size of your fist. Stage lights are like bigger than the size of your head. Imagine one of those popping. It'd be like a mini explosion. Fucking terrifying. The soundtrack was produced by Colin Stetson and Rob Kleiner. Nick Allen of The Hollywood Reporter noted that the score incorporates trumpets during the film's climax. This is in reference to the mythology of Paimon being heralded by the sound of trumpets. Judy Collins' 1967 version of Joni Mitchell's Both Sides Now plays during the end credits, again calling back to this idea that the film is cut between two sides of a coin, two sides of a story. We have what the family's going through, and then we have the reason why everything's happening because of what the grandmother and the coven set up. On Anzac Day, a day of remembrance in Australia, New Zealand, and Tonga for all those who had died during war times or passed trying to keep peace in times of conflict. The trailer for Hereditary was played before the PG-rated family film Peter Rabbit in a cinema in Inaloo, Western Australia. According to a report in the Sydney Morning Herald, the Hereditary preview was accidentally shown to family audiences and created a small panic in the theater. The theater was apparently full of families, including at least 40 very small children. The theater erupted into screams and cries. In real life, the ritual used in the film was an authentic demon invocation from the infamously dark grimoire, the Ars Croatia. This grimoire is known for being the first book of the Lesser Key of Solomon, an 18th century grimoire or Book of Shadows, spell book, etc. This book details dozens of real-life rituals to summon and command any of the 72 demons allegedly bound by historic King Solomon. Yeah, the one from the Bible. It actually provides sigils, appearances, and hierarchies for demons and spirits like Baal, Ashtaroth, and Paimon himself. Yup, he's a real demon. It serves as a guide and to either gain wealth, power, and or knowledge, or services by real demons. In the film, they used actual sigils, demon hierarchy, and rituals. In the film, they used actual sigils, research about demon hierarchy, and the ritual crowns mirror descriptions used in traditional demonology and mirror magic. Spooky. I'm actually surprised more fucked up shit didn't happen after the Hereditary set, because they were calling on like a real demon, and they were like, all the beheadings is very true to the demon Paimon's like offerings. His image, he literally has like a belt with severed heads on his like little belt chain. So too close for comfort, too true to home. Encounters. For encounters tonight, I wanted to find spooky stories from directors, actors, stage handlers, when they were working on a witchy paranormal film and when spooky things arose. So for our first encounter, this is Wes Craven on The Serpent and the Rainbow. One of the writers was dosed with a voodoo potion somehow one night while making the movie. He had went down to Haiti to interview some of the actual voodoo practitioners who appeared in the film, and at the end of the interview, he told the voodoo doctor he would like to be kind of introduced to the whole magic thing. The voodoo doctor smiled and said, "Well, then you will be." The writer then proceeded to go mad over the course of the next week. He stopped wearing clothes, stopped writing, and locked himself in his room because he thought the cast and crew were actually trying to kill him. He scaled the roof one night and got into Wes's room to tell him goodbye, thinking they were going to murder him the very next day. Luckily, the director had emergency lifted him to a hospital in Miami the very next day and sent his wife to get him. The writer woke up about a week later and said the last thing he remembered was the voodoo doctor saying, "Well, then you will be." Mm-hmm. Then there was Vera Farmiga on the Conjuring set, and some of the stories that come from the Conjuring set are actually like my all-time favorite spooky ghost stories to happen on a film set. There's so many. Actually, one of my favorite podcasts, Two Girls, One Ghost, they are literal rock star, superstar girl bossing so hard that they were able to have Chris and Chad Hayes, the writers and directors of the Conjuring films and like that whole universe. They actually had them on the show and they spilled all the hot tea on everything that happened on set, everyone's different spooky experiences or ghost stories or just strange phenomena that happened. It was quite the episode. I highly recommend you go and listen to it because there's so much. This is just one of those little gems. So, the 2013 film The Conjuring tells the story of the Perron family who allegedly experienced a horrific haunting at their Rhode Island farmhouse in the 1970s. The case would be investigated by demonologist Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are played by Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, respectively, in the film. Although members of the Perron family and Lorraine Warren visited the set, Warren also makes a cameo in the film. Nothing supernatural happened during filming. However, Vera Farmiga had a far different experience. The day Farmiga met with the director, James Wan, to discuss joining the film, she had been researching Lorraine Warren on her computer. After finishing her call with Wan, Farmiga opened her computer to continue her research on Lorraine Warren and was shocked by what she saw. Farmiga described 3 digital claw marks that somehow ran in a diagonal from the top right corner to the bottom left of her computer screen. It made absolutely no sense, especially because they weren't real cracks and they didn't exist on the pages she was looking at, but somehow a blending of the two. After filming on The Conjuring had wrapped, Farmiga awoke to find 3 long claw marks left on her upper thigh, and she didn't have any pets that could do such a thing. And lastly, we have a story from the cast and crew on the infamous Rosemary's Baby. Those involved in the 1968 horror masterpiece Rosemary's Baby believed they were involved in a curse. One of the following people afflicted was producer William Castle, who developed kidney stones after receiving excessive hate mail about the film. Castle said he hallucinated scenes from the movie while he was hospitalized for the kidney stones. The film's composer, Christoph Komeda, took a nasty fall at a party and actually slipped into a coma afterwards. He sadly never woke up and died a year after the film was released. What is especially strange is that a similar fate befalls the character Hutch in both the book and the film version. And lastly, the idea that Rosemary's Baby was cursed took on a life of its own in 1969 when the Manson family murdered Sharon Tate, who played the main character, the main woman, the female lead in Rosemary's Baby, her unborn child, and the guests at her home that night. Tate was the wife of director Roman Polanski, and Polanski had initially wanted Tate to play Rosemary before casting Mia Farrow. Some blamed Tate's murder on the film, and some couldn't help but realize the spooky parallels of the fact that Roman was director, Tate was supposed to be Rosemary, except that she was, in real life, pregnant with a baby of her own, only for both their lives to be taken way too soon. Well, that's my gasp for you all. I hope it tickled your goosebumps and left that brain of yours spinning for the night. I hope you enjoyed rituals and reality, and if you yourself have any other stories from movie sets or real-life rituals, authentic ceremonial magic come true, please let me know. Shoot me an email, shoot me a demon. Don't shoot me a demon, please. Shoot me a DM. I'd love to hear about it, please. I have experience with witchcraft and Wicca, and if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them, or if you just want to trade stories, let me know. If you ghoulies or spooks have any of your own spooky encounters, strange happenings, or whatever it may be, make sure you send those stories straight to me. Email it to our podcast email at gasp.the midnight.mystique@gmail.com. I will read any and all emails personally and answer them personally if you decide to send your spooky stories or encounters my way. Please make sure you do so with permission and what your preferred pronouns and aliases are so I can credit you appropriately. If you want to follow along with us and get sneak peeks on upcoming episodes, see any pictures I post for each episode, as well as another way to send us your thoughts, questions, or scares, you can follow Gasp the Podcast on Instagram at The Midnight Mystique. That's @TheMidnightMystique. For even more Suki, that's me. You can find me on Instagram at SukiSuxen. That's @SukiSuxen. If you enjoyed our little spook show and you want to support me and Goose, please make sure you rate, you review, give us 5 stars, push the notifications, subscribe, comment. Comments are great. Actually, I am going to start doing something where I share my favorite comments that you guys leave. So if you want another way to be shout out on here, please leave me a comment so I can read it. And make sure you're sharing the podcast with your work fam, chosen fam, acquaintances, frenemies, book club homies, skate park crew, burlesque troupe, drag fam, whoever you care about, because word of mouth is everything to me, spookies. And remember, sharing is caring, and caring is scaring. All right, now, don't forget my spookies, who always keep it creepy. Sensually yours, Suki Suxen.